thrilled to introduce to you all a woman I have the honor to call friend, Krista.
I didn't realize I'm wearing the same shirt tonight as I am in that picture. I have no fancy clothes. You can see from my shoes. I'm not a very fancy person. So to introduce myself, well, I was going to say all the things that Michelle just said, so I don't need to go through. My husband was coming with me tonight, but our babysitter, I can't stand microphones. I cannot stand microphones. I have such a loud voice because I'm a teacher, so being in the microphone is weird. But our babysitter got sick, so James is at home with the girls. So Michelle, I was so honored when she asked me to be the keynote speaker. I was a bit shocked too because she knows a lot of really great people, and I was like, are you sure that you want me to share my story? She also knows I swear a lot. So my husband told me to keep it in check. And one of my students is here tonight too, so who just happens to be the executive director at Ups and Downs. Yes. I'm so proud of you. Yes, I am. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about our journey and Adele's diagnosis and how we were told, kind of where we're at now, and the nonprofit that I started in 2014. So how we were told, I was actually at home with Brindley, and Brindley was 10 months old at the time, and my phone rang. That's when we still had landlines. And a nurse was on the other end. I didn't know her, and she said, "Hi, Krista, this is so-and-so. I just wanted to let you know about your ultrasound and your blood test results." And I said, "Okay." And she said, "Everything looks fantastic." And I said, "Oh, that's wonderful." And then she goes, "Your baby might be born a little bit smaller." And honestly, I was actually excited because I thought, okay, Brindley was almost 8 pounds. So if this one's smaller, well, it might feel a little bit better. And then she said, "Oh, and your placenta may not be able to sustain life." And I was like, and I'm not kidding, when she started the conversation with, "Everything looks fantastic." And I said, "Wonderful." So because I'm a teacher, I repeated everything she just said to me. And she goes, "Oh, what I'm telling you is you have a 1 in 2 chance that your baby will be born with Down syndrome." And in that moment, I just burst into tears. And I was like, what? And then all I heard was CVS and amnio after that. And I remember asking her, I said, "Well, what do I do now? Do I reach out to somebody? Do I talk to somebody? What do I do?" No guidance. And I said, "Should I call my OB?" And she's like, "Well, you can if you'd like." So I actually reached out to my OB that day, and they said, come in, let's have a chat." I was obviously very upset. So my husband and I, we went in and met with them, and they kind of give us our options on testing and what we could do. So we opted to go with the NIPT, the Harmony test, where they draw my blood, you pay your $1,000, they ship it off to Quebec, and they separate my DNA from baby's DNA. So that came back greater than 99%. So I remember the first words out of my mouth were, "Well, I can't do this. I can't do this." And my husband is a bit more the quieter, more passive. That's why we are still married today. And so he just kind of went along with my emotions, I guess. And my OB, she let us grieve. She let us kind of have our time. And then we went to our next ultrasound, and the doctor at Foothills said, "She actually looks too perfect to have Down syndrome." So it was kind of like a moment of like, he used the word perfect to describe my baby, so that was great. But then it was like, well, she looks too perfect to have Down syndrome. So I said to him, I was like, well, I'm like, I know you don't know me, but I'm very A-type. I like to know what's going on. I need to be 100%. And he said at the time that the NIPT was actually a newer test that they were doing. So he said he felt it wasn't reliable. So I said, well, what would you do? And he said, my wife would have an amnio. So I said, okay, let's do it. I also didn't realize that prenatal testing was a touchy subject. I found that out afterwards when I guess people kind of judged us on doing the Harmony test and going for an amnio. But I didn't really care what they said. So we went for the amnio, and the nurse called me, I think it was 4 days later with, I think they're called the FISH results. And she came back and she said, I think you know, right? And I was like, okay, yeah, okay, we know. But I kept going back to the word that the doctor had used when we met and when he said that she looked perfect. And so I had said to my husband, I was like, well, like, how do you terminate a pregnancy when somebody said, like, your baby is perfect? But I also knew that we had to go through kind of the emotions and we had to go through the stages. So you grieve. We never really got angry. There was no blaming, like, oh, you're so old or whatever. Because it was always like, well, old people have babies with Down syndrome. It didn't really feel like we were old. So we decided kind of from that moment to get educated. We were like, hey, let's get educated. Let's stay off of Google. Let's figure out what we need to do. And so I told James, I was like, Google nothing on Down syndrome. So James goes and Googles Down syndrome and he finds some book and he's like, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna get the best book and read all about it. And oh my gosh, this book that came in the mail, it was atrocious. And it was all stats and it was like, your baby will be born with a heart condition and your baby's tone will be this and you'll have to do this and burden on society. And I was like, throw it out, James. I mean, I said way to go on getting a book, but chuck it in the garbage. And so we met with a family who had a child with Down syndrome. And actually when we were there, he was getting therapy. So it was very real and it was everything, it was kind of cool to see. And then I remember my sister, she called me up one day and she goes, yeah, so like, I just want to let you know that I did some research and Down syndrome's totally doable. Yeah. And she's like, you've got this. And it was funny because she was so very matter of fact. She was like, you guys are going to be just fine. Like, you're going to be just fine. And I was like, okay, Ange. We had lots of appointments up to Adele's birth. She was born at 35 weeks. And yes, she was born smaller. She was 5 pounds, 4 ounces. And honestly, that was like a sneeze compared to the 8-pound Brinley. James missed the birth of his daughter, which kind of sucked. That's a whole other story. We can all get together at a pub one night. We can talk about that. So after the delivery, my blood pressure shot up and I had to be put in a room for 24 hours. Nobody told me how Adele was doing. It was crazy. And then I remember a nurse coming in and I had said to her, and I don't know why I even said this, I think I was high. I said, I know this isn't your job, but could you just go check on my baby? Yeah, it's her job. So anyway, she's like, of course I'll go. So anyway, she went, she took a picture and because I hadn't seen her at all. And so she came back and she showed me and I was like, oh my gosh, she's so cute. And then this picture in the middle was the first time I met Adele. And I remember, you can see a tear on my cheek. You know how loud NICUs are, like it's all the machines and the beeping and people talking. And I remember I heard none of it. And all I saw was this little baby. And I thought, we did it. Like we made it. After all these weeks of, people saying like, it's gonna be tough or it's gonna be a big journey, the appointments, the tests, the ultrasounds, and she had made it and she was here. And oh my gosh, was she just the cutest. She needed a little bit of extra help. She ended up being put on oxygen, and she had the NG tube. That third picture is one of my most favorite pictures. So we got pregnant with Adele the same year we had Brinley. I know what it takes to get pregnant, so nobody has to be like, well, you should have known. I blame it on James. But so Brinley was 16 months when her sister was born. And this was in the NICU. And Brinley was sitting on in her stroller, and she wanted the pillow on the top of the stroller, and then I would put Adele on top. And Adele would be fast asleep, but her arm would always reach out, and Brinley she would hold her hand. It was the sweetest. It was the sweetest. Except for the time that Brinley spilt an entire juice box down her clothes, and she was naked in the NICU. That's also another story. I don't regret any of the emotions that I felt, because I know there's a lot of families in our community that say, like, I wish I didn't grieve, I wish I didn't cry, I wish I didn't get that upset. But this is the thing, is it's not a lack of love, right? It's fear of the unknown, and it's worry, and you think about, like, I remember walking into the NICU one day, so Adele was probably about 3 days old, and instantly I was like, is she gonna get married? Right? And James was like, slow down, slow down. And I was like, will she have a partner? Like, will she live on her own? You know, and James is more live in the moment, and he's like, you gotta just let's just get her out of the NICU and get her home. But those are the things that you think about. But now 10 years later, I look at where we are, and Adele she's love and she's light. And I was just telling a friend outside that her new thing right now is she'll look at you and she'll be like, yeah, boy. She says it to her aides every day. Like, her one aide is like 65, and I picked her up one day and the aide goes, yeah, so Adele looked at me today, and she goes, yeah, boy. And I was like, I don't know where, I don't know why. And yeah, baby. And she also calls her dad by his first name, which is also quite funny. Like, he'll be like, come on, Adele, let's go get in the car. No, James. No, James. And then she'll just burst into laughter. But she's hilarious. She's a sasshole. But she is joy and love and light, and the kid wakes up happy every day. Now, I know some of you are probably like, well, yeah, because kids with Down syndrome are always happy. They are not. She has all the emotions just like we do. So she gets angry and she gets sad, but I do give her the credit that she does wake up happy every day. The one thing that we do think about all the time is if we've done enough. Like, have we done enough? Have we? And it always goes back to the therapy piece, the OT-PT speech, behavioral support. Have we actually done enough for her? And I'm sure if you're a parent to a neurodiverse child sitting out here, you feel the same. Whether you're at the start of your journey or midway through the journey or later on, you always wonder, did I actually do enough for her? This is also one of my favorite pictures. So our story has been included in the Canadian Down Syndrome Society, the parent package, in a book too that's been published. And this was Brinley. This is exactly what she said. My sister Adele has Down syndrome. It was scary at first, but it gets better and better. When we play together, I sometimes have to help her, but it feels good that I get to teach her new things. I'm grateful that she's my sister. They are the best of friends, those two. Brinley also has loads of empathy for others, which makes me so happy. Except for during this photo shoot, can I just say that my kid forgot to take her car sickness bands off her arms? I was like, Brinley, they're in all the pictures. She's like, I'm sorry. So have I done enough? I think that very often. Now that kind of leads me into our project that I started in 2014. After Adele was born, I started hearing more and more stories about families being encouraged to terminate. and that our children were seen as a burden on society, who are incapable of success and being productive members of society. And I couldn't understand that, because when I looked at Adele, I saw this beautiful, capable being who, like, damn right, you're gonna go to post-secondary, like, you're gonna do something with your life, because you can't live with mom and dad for the rest of your life and live off of us, because I also need a life at some point. So I was hearing all these stories, and it was more negative stories than it was the positive stories. And I thought, I need to change the narrative. And so I'm going to do this. I think it's so important that families hear congratulations instead of I'm sorry. The termination rate for Down syndrome pregnancies is around 80-85%, which is incredibly high. In Iceland, it's 100%. And they boast that they will be Down syndrome free in the next 10 years. It's disgusting. So not that I can change everybody's views and perspectives, but I do have a very big voice. And so for us, our mission at Adele's Baskets is to provide families with comfort and reassurance, and that for me, every life has value, and every baby should be welcomed into the world with excitement and love. We also give the families a real kick-ass basket filled with lots of really great goodies. And also a resource list to help them get started, because it's very overwhelming for families at the start. And a lot of families don't know who to turn to, who to reach out to, who to ask, different funding that you can get. Yeah, these are obviously pictures of a few of our baskets. We sit with families in hospital rooms. We cry, we laugh, and we understand, and we get it. It's an unexpected journey, but it's one that's filled with love and light and joy. There are many times that we sit with families and their grief is so immense, and not because there's a lack of love, but a fear of the future and a fear of the unknown, and the focus is very much on the diagnosis. When we spend time with families, we get to answer questions, we get to support them, and above all, we get to let them know that it will be okay. I always leave the hospital room or home saying, it will be okay. One of the social workers at the PLC said to me once, she's like, there's only so much we can do for these families. She said, we can give them brochures and we can give them, some contact information, some community supports. She said, but there's just so much grief at the time. She said, and then when you guys come in and you visit and you give them this basket and you sit with them, she goes, it's so different after you leave that room. Like there's that feeling of hope. And for us, that's what's important, is we want families to feel that there is hope. It's a feel-good project. It takes a community to keep it going. We rely solely on donations from our community. We umbrella under the PrEP program, which we're grateful that they took us under their wing. But most importantly is every life has value, and every life should be celebrated. So that brings me to the end of my spiel. I met Michelle years ago, and we met at a food court in Chinook Mall because she didn't know if I was super sketchy, and I didn't know if she was super sketchy, so we wanted to be in a public place just in case something bad went down. And we sat there, and she had so much to say, and she had all this vision. And I was like, you are one of the coolest people I've ever met. Her energy and her passion and her excitement. And from there, we just stayed connected. We use each other as sounding boards for, different, she's asked me what language is best, right? I struggle sometimes with the word disability, but I know it's still very widely used. And, so we came up with neurodiverse and neurodivergent, and honestly though, whatever works for you. And their vision is incredible. And that's why I put it down here. We envision a world where all children of neurodiversity and their families are connected to community support resources that they need in health, education, social services, sports, leisure, recreation, and financial programs when they need them. This is your opportunity tonight to be a life changer for families in our community. There is such a need, and early intervention is key. Those first few years of life, that is what our kids need. And the growth that we've seen with Adele is because that's what she had. Connections help transform stress into relief, discouragement into hope, helplessness into empowerment, and isolation into togetherness. So please consider being a life changer. I hope you have a great night, and thank you for letting me share some of my journey with you.